Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with Chris Ballas and Anthony Broom here for our Thursday edition. We will talk a little bit of National Signing Day. Michigan inks a top 10 class in the country for 2022. We will get a little bit into Michigan versus Georgia as the game is approaching. All of us headed down to Florida, not next week, but the week after, I think. The days of the week are weird around Christmas. I don't even know what days they are, but we're heading down the 26th. Just after Christmas, and we'll be able to attend a little bit of practice, talk to some guys down there, get a bunch of coverage. So make sure to stay with us at thewolverine.com. $1 gets you an entire year, so it'll take you through signing day next year. It'll take you into bowl season, potential another college football playoff next year, and all of that. But guys, signing day, always a whirlwind of a day. Ended a little bit earlier than it did last year. Not a ton of fireworks, not a ton of surprises. There were guys that popped up late in the class and things like that. But Chris, man, you've been, not to, this is no offense, but you've been around for more signing days and you've seen a lot of crazy things happen around, college football. We saw some things nationally with Jackson State and all that. What are some of the kind of crazier things you've seen?
When Jim Harbaugh talked about Andrew Gentry, I thought that was interesting. And he said, okay, we got a call out of the blue because Virginia lost its coach. And this kid, by the way, Gentry was, I think, a top 50 kid in some sites. I mean, like one of the elite offensive linemen in the country. And I think what he saw with what Sharon Moore did with these guys this year, he thought, okay, well, if it's not going to be Virginia, let's go somewhere else where I'm comfortable, where I'll get well coached. And so Harbaugh goes over there, gets 90 minutes of this kid. He's at a Mormon mission. He gets 90 minutes with him because the church elders say it's okay. Signs him at the end of those 90 minutes or gets a commitment, and then the kid signs. So I thought that was fascinating. But the best ones that I remember, Carlos Brown came out of nowhere. Fred Jackson went down there. This is Michigan's running back. He was a 4-star kid, might have been close to a 5-star out of Georgia. And there was somebody at the school that did not want him to go to Michigan. And so when Fred Jackson, Michigan's running backs coach, showed up, they said, "Oh, sorry, Carlos isn't here, man." And so he never got to meet the kid face to face. And Fred's like, "I'm wasting my time." Well, on signing day, he gets a call from Carlos Brown saying, "Why'd you stop recruiting me? And I was really interested, and why didn't you come?" And long story short, he told him what happened, and Carlos Brown says, "I want to come to Michigan." So he basically came without getting the in-home and everything else. That was pretty crazy. And then going down to obviously see Chad Henne. Everybody thought in Pennsylvania he was going to Penn State. And in fact, his coach, we were making plans to go down there a couple days in advance because we had heard that he was going to Michigan. This is Michigan's last, NFL quarterback, right? I guess Jake Rudock kind of counts. He had a cup of coffee. But so his coach, Jim Cantafios, would not. He said, "Well," he goes, "I'll just tell you this because it's an 8.5-hour drive. I think it'll be worth your while," which we kind of knew it was based on the sources we'd gotten. But Penn State had no idea. So we go down there. And Chad Henne announces for Michigan, and Cantafios' phone just starts blowing up with calls from coaches from Penn State wondering what the heck happened. That was fascinating. So there's always stories like that, guys. This is probably the least amount of work I've done on a signing day, thanks to EJ and Tim, our unbelievable coworkers, and what you guys have done. Turns out to be one of the best days we've ever had, too. So maybe there's a pattern there, and I just need to keep my hands off it.
I just, real quick, have a couple words on the Carlos Brown story. Carlos Brown.
Yes, you know it. So that's a running gag on the website. I don't know how it started, but somebody just one time put Carlos Brown, and then the guy below him put Carlos Brown. So there you have it.
And then you get really 50 Carlos Brown messages.
50 Carlos Browns, scintillating stuff.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I think the first signing day that I did was it was a February signing day, the 2015 one, which was Harbaugh's first class. I remember the Mike Weber drama, and they took Karan Higdon earlier in the day, and that was drama because, they took a running back behind Mike Weber's back, and there was that whole saga. So that was one that stood out. Obviously, the Najee Harris recruitment and everything that went along with that was a wild one that I remember. I don't have any most of the stories I can remember are from non-signing days. I mean, there was Isaiah Wilson's Christmas pageant that everyone had to sit through watching on a Facebook Live. There was the kid, I want to say out of Farmington Hills, a wide receiver that was somewhere out there. He teased an announcement on Easter Sunday, and then it wound up being the fact that his dad was in some kind of comedy show when all these recruiting writers had kind of stopped what they were doing on Easter to provide content and things like that. And it is the Wild West. And you see it with, the stuff with Keontae Goodwin and Michigan State and Kentucky and some of the stuff that went on with that, the Travis Hunter stuff, flipping from Florida State to Jackson State. Like we are truly in unprecedented times, as people have been leading emails with for the last year and a half since the pandemic started. But it's nice that it was a good day for Michigan, not a chaotic day, just a good day with good news that continued to come in. And it is incredible the work that they were able to do. Most of these guys, and I'm working on a roundup for the website, most of these guys that helped close this class out haven't even been here for a calendar year yet. It's incredible the effort that they pulled off. And hey, you know what? Novel concept. When you win games and win a Big Ten championship, it's a lot easier to have something to sell. I don't think they probably get some of the guys they get if that doesn't happen, but you have a result to sell. Closed out the class on a high note. I know there's still some plates spinning for the February signing day, but all in all, to come out of that day, coming off of the year they had previous to this and all of the change, it's just a remarkable job by everybody involved.
Yeah, and reading some national stories that have Michigan in there among their group of 4 or 5 winners for the entire day on signing day because they were able to close late with a couple guys. And you mentioned what coaches were recruiting who. Ron Bellamy deserves a huge shout out for the job he did. Seems like every big time recruit that Michigan was in on or had a chance with or ended up landing, at some point, Ron Bellamy was on the phone with him. Ron Bellamy went and visited him. Outstanding recruiter, as we thought he would be when he came here. Knowing he knows the high school kids, he relates to them. He's just a great guy altogether because we'd all talked to him, beforehand when he was a high school coach. And now, seeing the job he's doing is fantastic. Keon Saab from Clemson, who, he just worked on throughout the cycle, even when he was committed to Clemson. And eventually they're able to get him to decommit and then commit to Michigan. I think he's a guy that could impact early. What did you guys think about the entire class as a whole? I was over at Will Johnson's ceremony. He's a guy I think is going to play pretty soon here. And then Darius Clemens, the kid they were able to get, who I didn't even know who that was a week ago, is a top 100 wide receiver, 6'3", 4.37 40-yard dash speed. So, some guys that I think could step right in.
Amazing finish. And if they'd gotten Deion Walker, and somebody will have to convince me that, the whole Kentucky to Detroit thing is ridiculous. And I feel, honestly, this sounds arrogant, but I kind of feel bad for the kid and what he's missing out on, what I think he's going to be missing out on at Michigan. And that's easy for me to say, I'm not in his shoes, but knowing what Michigan's about and having experienced like the Ohio State game this year that he missed, he didn't come. And that was a pretty good indication that he wasn't going to be coming to Michigan, even though they tried to close with him and make up some ground. But man, what an unbelievable environment and what an unbelievable opportunity he could have had here. But Kentucky's Kentucky, and they're doing a pretty solid job on their recruiting trail. So, but all in all, man, couldn't have asked for much more. They've filled a lot of positions of need. They got some great athletes, guys, flat out. If you look at what they brought in on signing day. So, and we don't know what these guys are going to be until we see them play. Bo Schembechler always used to say 1/3 will be starters, 1/3 will play, and the other third will fizzle out. But and that's basically, if you go down the list, that's how it's been, and that's how it will be. You try to predict. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Who's going to be that third, and third? But on paper, it looks like a great class.
Yeah, I mean, for Deion Walker really to be the only quote unquote miss of the day. I mean, they flipped Alex Orji, they flipped Morian Walker again. I think Walker, another guy that Bellamy was in on pretty hard. It's you want to always stack as many blue chip talents into a class as you can, but a guy like for anyone that's worried that they didn't get Deion Walker, go look up some of Kenneth Grant's tape. I mean, that's a big physical guy who I think is 6'5", 340, 350, but he moves like he's 70 pounds less than that. I know EJ has seen him a bunch and is really high on what he brings to the table. There are guys up and down this class that I don't really question the evaluations of Jim Harbaugh and his staff. I mean, you go look at the guys on this roster now that helped them win a Big Ten championship. I mean, Hassan Haskins, Cade McNamara,
Ronnie Bell. You want to bring Ronnie Bell up, right?
Ronnie Bell. I mean, that's the biggest example of it. A two-star kid who was a former basketball player, not on anyone's radar. So, they do a really good job, I think. there's been some consternation about, not recruiting the state of Michigan as well and not recruiting Ohio as well. But I really do think what they've done with all of the guys that have been on Jim Harbaugh's staff is they kind of moneyball it to a certain extent. Like, hey, we're going to go take a flyer on this guy out of Idaho instead, like a Colston Loveland, who I think that guy is going to be, I don't know how he fits into all this. I think he's extremely talented, and go watch some of his highlight film as well. Yeah. So I don't question the evaluations. I mean, I just, there are definitely needs going into the 2023 cycle, namely on the offensive line, an edge rusher too. That really was kind of maybe the biggest bummer of the day, is that Ethan Burke flips out of the class, and then it doesn't look like it seems really unlikely that Cavante Henry will wind up sticking in the class. He's taking it to the February signing day. So edge rusher is going to be a position of need, but they're kind of set up to take some big swings now in 2023. So it's all about, I mean, I think there's a good mixture of guys that I think will play right away, like a Darius Clemens, like a Will Johnson, like some of those guys on the back end of the secondary. But you need those 3 or 4 year guys too, as we've seen. We'll talk a little bit later about basketball for a bit, but the mixture of those early impact and those program guys that could be your guys 3 or 4 years down the road that are the foundation of potential championship teams. I just think that all of that DNA is there, regardless of what the recruiting rankings say.
Yeah, look at the 2018 class, Aiden Hutchinson's class, which wasn't one of the highly touted ones, but it ended up having a stud who is probably going to be the number one pick in Aiden Hutchinson, and some great leaders. And then you sprinkle that in with some of the fifth-year guys, even a sixth-year guy like Andrew Vistardis, hell, a seventh-year guy like Jordan Whitley, who came from Oregon State. But, some of those juniors as well, and it's just been a perfect blend. So, yeah, you're right with some of those guys that will be more contributors down the road. Shifting focus to this bowl game coming up, it feels like it's been quite a while since the Iowa game. It feels like it's been the Ohio State game to me was like a year ago. And now we have a couple weeks until Michigan plays Georgia in the Orange Bowl for the college football playoff semifinal. As we start to kind of focus a little bit more on them over on our end of things. And Chris, I know you had a good conversation with a Georgia writer today, I believe you said. Share a little insight, I guess, about what that conversation was about. Michigan, we talked a little bit about it last week, but I think Michigan's, got a shot to win this game. And I was surprised a little bit that line moved from 7.5 to 8.5. We'll be interested to see where it ends up.
Yeah, that defense of Georgia's is what Palmer Thumbs from Georgia on 3 site and I talked about. That front seven is pretty darn good. And that's one of the things is how is Michigan going to be able to beat Georgia like Alabama did and airing it out with Cade McNamara? It's amazing how similar this Georgia and this Michigan offense seem to be. And that's one thing Palmer said. He said there was a game where they threw for 78 yards and beating Arkansas because they were running the ball so effectively, which reminds me, of course, of Michigan versus Washington, right, with Cade McNamara. And then there was a time where they threw 5 touchdowns in a game, which brings you to, Cade McNamara against whoever, where he threw, I don't know, what he threw 4 touchdowns against somebody, didn't he? 3?
Yeah, I think 3 it was his most, but
yeah, well, whatever it was. But
Penn
there were
State
games where, yeah, exactly, where they needed him to air it out a little bit more, and he did. So it's amazing the similarities there. So what it comes down to is the Michigan defense going to be as adept, in my opinion, at stopping Georgia as Georgia can be in stopping Michigan. Will Michigan be able to run the ball on the number 3 rushing defense in the country that has been tested against some of the best, right? So. But he said these are 2 physical teams that they kind of mirror each other, and I couldn't agree more with him. But I've seen that Georgia defense in action, and other than that Alabama game, man, these guys are crazy good. And Anthony's buddy Jim Nagy at the Senior Bowl wrote, I think in September, he said this will be a defense that young Georgia fans will tell their kids and grandkids about someday. And it has been, with that one exception. And in some ways, it reminds you of that 2006 Michigan team that was dominant up until they played Ohio State and gave up 42 points. Well, Georgia was dominant all year, and then they gave up 42 points against Alabama, which is an elite offense with an elite quarterback and really good receivers, great receivers. So can Michigan get that amount from the same thing from their guys that Alabama did? I don't think so. Will they have to? I don't know. We'll see how that offensive line does against that Georgia front. But should be a really good, exciting game. I expect it to be a lower scoring game, to be honest with you. I do think the 8.5 is a little too high. I think this game will be within a touchdown either way. And I would pick Georgia to win probably. But, guys, I've been wrong a lot this year when it comes to Michigan. Happily, I think I think I've picked 3 wrong games this year, and one of them was the loss to Michigan State, and then I picked them to lose to Wisconsin and then to Ohio State. So who knows? But I will say that they are not daunted at all, and they really feel like they have a great chance to win this game based on everything that we've heard from the building.
Well, keep picking them to lose. That's the key.
Right.
That's the key to all that, right?
Yep.
This matchup is so fascinating to me, and it starts with the spread. I mean, I don't think either team is going to score enough to outscore the other team by 8.5 points. That's a big number in a game like this. When you look at, I'm still diving into matchups and things like that, and how I feel about how these two teams go against each other. But it just, to me, when I go with gut feelings, which has been good this year at times and bad this year, depending on what week you followed the gambling column or not. I just see a game similar to that Penn State game where it's like 21-17 or 24-20, where even you get up that high and it might be. I'll put it this way: the afternoon game is probably going to be the game where all the points are scored in those two college football playoff games. Georgia or Alabama was able to do what it did to Georgia because and I talked about how recruiting rankings don't necessarily matter. When you get to this stage, this is where you start to see what that separation looks like. I think Michigan is good enough to compete with and beat whoever they could potentially face over the next month or so. But Alabama was able to do what they did because they have that next level, that next gear that they can go to with their quarterback, their skill players. And I feel very strongly about the development of Michigan's guys. I mean, it truly has developed into a pick your poison, who do you stop type of offense. But, Alabama just had that next level and won way more one-on-one matchups. And quite frankly, I mean, has the better quarterback. And that's where it's interesting. We see that meme on the internet that goes around of the two Spider-Men pointing at each other. This is Michigan and Georgia to me because it's, both teams have gotten, I can't say sterling quarterback play, but good enough quarterback play to get to the position that they'll be in on December 31st. It's going to be, to me, it comes down to the guy that, is probably kept cleaner and makes the least amount of mistakes. And you hate to boil it down and be that simplistic with it. But I think when you have this immovable force that is the Michigan football offensive line and this unstoppable object that is the Georgia defensive line, I think you do kind of look to the margins of, who wipes out who and who can outplay who in this game. And I just expect a low scoring game, and Michigan, I think, will give itself a puncher's chance. It's just going to be, is Georgia's, like, what Georgia team gets off the bus? Are they going to be the shell shocked team that got exposed in a rivalry game with a title on the line? Or are they going to be, angry and pissed off that happened and look to kind of get back on track of what we saw before? So all of that is extremely fascinating to me as we move into really, we have 15 days as we sit here Thursday and record it till this game takes place. It seems like a long time away, but with Christmas and everything, it's going to be here before we know it. We'll be getting on a plane to Fort Lauderdale here soon enough. So we'll see what happens, but that's my early thoughts kind of on where we stand.
One thing I'll add to what AB just said is that I think with the playoff and the possibility of playing Alabama again, I don't think you're going to see any other team except for a focused one that kind of like Michigan that really has an opportunity here. And talking to Palmer Thumbs, he said, they understand, what happened out there. They're not happy about it, but he firmly believes that they have an opportunity still to win it all, even with their quarterback situation. There have been people calling for JT Daniels. Of course, there were nutty Alabama fans calling for people's heads all year long after one loss to Texas A&M. So fire all the coordinators. I don't know if you guys saw Pete Feinbaum say that on ESPN, where he said, they couldn't take a call a day, or they had several calls a day talking about how they wanted to fire everybody but Nick Saban just because they were winning games by 2 points. So, but I think they'll be focused, and I think it'll be a great game. I know that Michigan's focused and really intent on proving that, okay, we are for real. It's not a fluke that we're here. We are number 2. We probably could have been the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, I'll say this about that, though. When you think about Georgia, they were, supposedly this team that was, just so much better than everybody else in the country. They're going to roll to the national championship. Looking at articles and things like that, like before the, conference championship, it was just Georgia and then everybody else. And then Alabama kind of, just kept playing pretty decent, gets by Auburn. And then, well, we have more talent than you at a lot of spots, and we're able to beat you. Think about Georgia and think about Kirby Smart's tenure there. Has he really won a big game at Georgia? I mean, not really. He's lost to Alabama, I think, every time. I don't think he's ever beaten Nick Saban there. And then they get to the playoff. I know he got to the national championship game, but then he lost to Nick Saban. So there's kind of a similar amount of pressure in my mind on Kirby Smart than there is kind of on Ryan Day, who's like either going to get an NFL job or like randomly get fired if he loses to Michigan next year or something. Like these places have such high expectations because of the level of talent they have. But like Kirby Smart, they love him, but I feel like there's kind of this thing bubbling under the surface where it's like, if you can't get it done with these guys that you're bringing in, look at the class they brought in yesterday, then maybe we got to look somewhere else. I don't know where they look. I think it's the wrong mentality because when you look at some of the SEC teams, they just continually fire their coaches. Doesn't always work out, but something there, I think, with Kirby Smart, the big game type of thing, the pressure. I mean, there's so much pressure. In Michigan, there's not a ton of pressure going into this game. They're somewhere where a lot of people didn't expect them to be. They're playing with house money at this point as the number 2 team in the country. They got all the confidence in the world. They're not going to be scared of those guys on the front, those front 7 guys that you talk about. Jordan Davis, who's just an absolute beast at defensive tackle. So I think that's something to watch. And then, Anthony, when you talked about the quarterbacks, I firmly believe Michigan has the better quarterback room in this battle. I'd rather have J.J. McCarthy and Cade McNamara on my team if I'm them compared to Stetson Bennett and JT Daniels, who, I've read a couple things in the last couple of weeks. Are they just going to come out with JT Daniels in this game? You never know. But
Yep.
Probably not. But I would still rather have Michigan's guys. And like you said, Anthony, 8.5. I mean, I expect lower scoring and probably something within a touchdown. Could come down to 1-2 plays. And, I think if Michigan can get in that type of game, they've shown they can win those. So it will be interesting. They've been more tested in tight games than Georgia, who's rolled over a lot of teams as well, and really hadn't played the toughest SEC schedule. So it will be interesting as we kind of continue to dive into this matchup. But anything else on this game, fellas, before we quick talk hoops here before a huge Saturday night tilt against Southern Utah?
I think you covered it all in about that 5.5 minute rant you just went on there, pal. So
I'll just say this about Kirby Smart and Georgia and the matchup with Michigan. I'm old enough to remember some satellite camp stuff and some tweets that went back and forth. So if that, Kirby Smart, there's pressure on him that if he comes back to Athens having lost to Jim Harbaugh, it's going to get, Urban Meyer's available now. So,
God,
see what happens
there you go.
They may pull they may take away his helicopter if he doesn't win that game. I don't know how he'd get back, but basketball, obviously it's been tough for this team. They took a couple steps forward, one step, huge step back against Minnesota, losing on your home floor and, really getting dominated in a second half again, against a Minnesota team that's been good, but, you don't feel like they're going to be top half of the Big Ten when this thing's said and done. And Michigan kind of needed that game if it wants to contend for the Big Ten here, unless you steal quite a few games down the stretch. And frankly, it doesn't look like the product is there for that to happen. Couple games here, right? But your thoughts on where things stand?
No kind of about it, Clayton. I mean, you need to win that game at home. Minnesota was picked to finish last. They've been better than expected, but 2 assists on 29 buckets, and you let those guys get to the rim like you did. That was embarrassing, flat out. And I think Juwan Howard would be the first one to admit it, that just can't happen. So, but what are the answers? That's the one thing that you look at. Are there lineups that work so well together that, okay, we have to shorten the bench? I don't see it. Is there a point guard that's automatically just going to flip a switch and start getting into the lane and making better decisions? I don't see that either, unless Devontae Jones somehow, gets his mojo back that we saw this summer when he played really well in the NBA G League camp. But he has problems staying on the floor, foul trouble. He's not shooting the ball when people go under ball screens, and he's going to have to do that. That's one area where Mike Smith absolutely excelled. And I can't believe the number of people who got this one wrong that said, okay, this is going to be an upgrade at the point for Michigan from Mike Smith. It certainly has not been. Now, there's still time, right? So for Devontae Jones to improve, and I think he can, but I don't think he's going to be that guy that you can will you to a Big Ten title, that you can put the ball in his hands and say, okay, go out and win us some games. So that to me is the biggest concern. Frankie Collins isn't ready yet. 5 of 16, I think, from the free throw line at this point too. How do you put him on the floor at the end of a game? So some red flags there, fellas.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting into scary territory here because, you can deal with losses to Arizona, who's, a top 10 team. I think they're number 7 on KenPom. You can deal with losing on the road at North Carolina, albeit it needed to be more competitive than that. And it looked like you wanted to be there. But losing to Minnesota, I mean, they have one scholarship player on the roster from last year. And, they've been much better. Ben Johnson's doing an outstanding job there early on. I would assume that when Big Ten play kicks into gear, Water will probably find its level there, but I don't see it in the roster construction. I mean, people keep asking, how does this team turn it around? Like, it's Brandon Johns has to be the 10 points a game guy he was down the stretch last year. He's been boom or bust and bust for most of the year, which can't happen out of a senior. I know there's been a lot of questions about what they're getting out of the freshman class and if those guys are ready. Devontae Jones is a graduate transfer, and Brandon Johns is a senior. You're not getting what you need out of those guys, and it can't all be just Eli Brooks and Hunter Dickinson. I mean, for them to turn it around, it's Johns has to wake up and be consistent, and Caleb Houston needs to flip a switch and all of a sudden become some sort of amalgamation between Franz Wagner and Isaiah Livers, and a point guard has to emerge, and this too big lineup has to click and be a strength for them. And I'm getting concerned, guys. I don't see it right now. I mean, they are 10 games into this season. I mean, things that happen inside the vacuum of one game, I can chalk that up to just being, an outlier, but they haven't really gotten better since they lost to Seton Hall. In fact, I think they've regressed in a couple areas. So you really have got, you've got Southern Utah, Purdue, Fort Wayne. You'll go to UCF on December 30th, which won't be an easy game. You get Rutgers at home, which won't be, or Rutgers, I'm sorry, on the road. Then you get Michigan State at home on January 8th. Like, there's a lot of growth that has to happen in a short amount of time. And I just don't know if they'll be, when January kicks into high gear, I don't think this team is going to be as ready as we thought they would. And could they still make the tournament? Sure, it's possible. They're in the Big Ten. I mean, if you rack up enough wins, your resume will send you. But I'm pretty concerned right now. This is alarming, and quite frankly, 3 years, giving you brought in the number 1 recruiting class, and you're 3 years into a head coaching tenure, it's borderline unacceptable.
Yeah, and you know what else is unacceptable? 2 straight magazines. Just a little inside baseball here. Chris and I do a point counterpoint for the magazine, and I had to choose Michigan as a Big Ten championship contender in the last one, and that they will make the NCAA tournament in the last ones, or in this most recent one. So I will say this, it's a good exercise when you look at, what to figure out what you really think is going to happen down the stretch here. And there's still 20 games to go, but because to find reasoning and find, sound reasoning for thinking they're going to do this thing, there's certainly not enough evidence in the first 10 games to go off of. It's got to be things have to improve, and we've talked about that. They have to get better if they're going to get to that spot, and they got to get a lot better, I think, as well. Good to go here on this week's show. Anything else from either of you guys?
That'll do it. Got to get back to work.
Yes, sir. So join us at thewolverine.com. $1 gets you an entire year of coverage over there. We just had signing day stuff, bunch more to come from that. Football here heading to the college football playoff and the basketball season as they try to turn things around. So we will see everyone over on thewolverine.com.